Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
If you've been doing your festive food shopping this week, you might well wonder how Brexit is set to change your bills and your food quality. Without any official impact assessments, the studies that do exist are a mixed bag for farmers, consumers and animals. Our science editor Tom Clark has been looking at whether Brexit is the ghost at your Christmas feast or a bonanza of chlorine-washed partridge in a genetically modified pear tree.
On the first day of Brexit, my true love sent to me chlorine-washed poultry. On the second day of Brexit, my true love sent to me freedom from Europe and chlorine-washed poultry.
In theory, leaving the EU should make turkey and all the trimmings cheaper by reducing trade barriers with the rest of the world. According to one pro-Brexit analysis, each family in the UK could save about £300 off their annual food shopping bill.
Oh, it'll be fantastic for every British consumer, because if we're sensible, we will take the opportunity to reduce our tariffs. It's an 8 billion boost to the economy. So fantastic opportunity for every family to have more to eat at Christmas.
So let's talk turkey. The price of this one is largely dictated by European trade rules and animal welfare standards. But once we've left the EU, those rules no longer apply. We can get rid of the trade tariffs, have our own animal welfare standards and our own regulations, so we can look elsewhere to new low-cost markets.
Christmas is never a great time to be a turkey, but it's arguably better here than in countries outside the EU. Birds on this farm had it better than most. Free range, slow grown, and a premium product just in time. But even housed poultry in Britain has to meet minimum welfare standards. Ask a farmer and they'd argue EU regulations are there to protect animals and consumers, not help farmers. Producers in North and South America farm far more poultry, far more cheaply.
Any chlorine come anywhere near your turkeys before they hit the table?
Ban. It's so different to the US. We have a business in the US. We do what we do here in the US, and the legislation is just radically different to here. You know, a lot of the cost is stripped out. You know, you just farm turkeys and chickens, put them through a plant, and produce it as cheaply as you possibly can.
So for the consumer, there's one scenario: we sit down to that Christmas meal in December 2019 to a chlorine-washed turkey on the table, but it's quite a lot cheaper for the consumer.
Absolutely.
Where do you think that would leave the British turkey producer?
If they had to carry on with the same legislation and producing to the same standards, they wouldn't be in business. If price was the issue, because the British industry could not compete on price compared to legislation over in the likes of America and South America and other parts of the world, it would be impossible.
Producers in North and South America typically rear their birds at higher densities, more dependent on antibiotics, and yes, chlorine washing at the end of production.
There's no suggestion that America I'm sure European consumers maintain.
On the third day of Brexit, my true love sent to me freedom from Europe and chlorine-washed poultry.
So poultry farmers are a little anxious. But what about our pork producers? A hard Brexit could leave them as happy as pigs in blankets.
The ideal situation for a British pig farmer would be a relatively hard Brexit.
In 1999, the British government introduced higher welfare standards for pregnant sows on pig farms. Other EU countries were slow to follow suit. The UK pork industry has long argued that this left our producers unable to compete on volume and price, with cheaper pork muscling in from the EU.
We have lost half our industry in the UK due to unfair playing field. If I produced pigs to those standards, today you'd be filming me being arrested. It's illegal.
So a Brexit that blocks cheap pork imports from swamping our higher welfare producers would save their bacon.
The British sausage is very unique to Britain in the way we manufacture it. It's a short shelf life product, hasn't got nitrates in it.
We love our sausages, but will we be paying the same for them? Unless there's some post-Brexit mechanism to support the relatively small industry, prices could rise sharply in the short term, around 30p on a pack of sausages, 14 pence on bacon. But will our government really have the time or appetite to tweak trade deals to support each food sector and keep prices down? And even if the pork industry gets the hard Brexit it wants, there are still risks. Many of the workers, like these skilled butchers, are from elsewhere in the EU. And they're not the only sector with that headache.
On the fourth day of Brexit, my true love sent to me tariffs on imports, free trade deals, freedom from Europe, and chlorine washed poultry.
So what about our humble veg? Because most of them are produced and consumed in the UK, they're fairly Brexit-proof, except for one thing: the people who pick them for us.
There are 25 acres of sprouts and nearly 5,000 more of other veg on Home Farm in Suffolk. Machines have made harvesting sprouts less back-breaking, but veg growing and processing is seasonal and labour-intensive. And like Claudio and Valentin from Romania driving the sprout picker, almost all the workers are from the EU.
We rely heavily on migrant labour to harvest their we use a lot of UK labour crops. We can't find people from the UK to do this work out in the field. It's hard work, it's cold, wet work, and people don't want to do it.
If you look at that, you can.
With no official Brexit impact assessments from government, we spoke to the author of one of the only independent analyses looking at farm income.
Overall, you can see farm incomes declining under our scenarios in Brexit. However, within that, there are significant opportunities. Encouragingly, the top 25% of producers, in terms of efficiency, that is their ability to turn inputs into outputs, remain viable in any post-Brexit scenario.
As we leave Europe to dance to our own tune, some farmers could thrive, others go to the wall. Some of the food of Christmas future could get cheaper. But will that include the costs to things like animal welfare? The proof of the pudding, as they say, will be in the negotiations starting in earnest next year.
Well, I'm joined now from Westminster by the Conservative MP Neil Parish, who chairs the Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee. As a farmer himself, and his farmers received CAP payments over the years. You were against Brexit, so do you still believe that a post-Brexit future is bad for farmers?
I think it could be, but I think the secret is to get the deal right so that we can carry on trade and we can actually make sure we can produce good quality food and get some support still to both to agriculture and the countryside. It could be done, it's just we've got to have the right policies from Westminster and not just necessarily throw everything away that we've had in the past.
But it will be good or bad for consumers? I mean, will prices go up or down overall, do you think?
I mean, as long as we can do a deal where there aren't tariffs being put on, imports, and then perhaps tariffs again going on exports, then food can remain reasonably similar price. But of course, if you land up with lots of tariffs, then it could well push up the price. We've also got to make sure we've got enough labour in order to harvest our crops. All of these things need to be put in place. They can be done, but this bespoke deal is the right way to go with Europe, so that not only can we get the right food, but we can actually travel across borders. The lorries aren't stopped at borders. All of these things have to be got right for the future. I
mean, these are all things, of course, you dn't believe could be got right before the referendum. But I mean, I guess you all have to be sort of believers at Christmas time.
I don't in the case of whether you're a believer or whether you're not. I think what you decide is that once the British people have made this decision, then we can get this right. We can get a bespoke deal, but we have got to work very hard on it.
But there is a problem in that the government is trying to tell everybody that it's going to be good. And it seems to me that if you get a trade deal with the Americans and we end up getting lots of cheap American food for British consumers, that's great for the
chlorine wash the is the fact that the welfare standards are lower, higher density, the conditions are so good in their production states, and then they whack them with a chlorine base in order to get them fit to eat, not fit to eat, but they've a lower welfare standards. So we, the government, want to see higher standards, so we're going to make sure that imports don't come in under those lower standards, and that's going to be the challenge, especially if it was under WTO rules.
But could farming effectively be made, a thing of history, really, in this country? I mean, you could effectively end up environmental arguments for, preserving things and just going back to the land, if you like, start winning out.
We can have both, because you need both from an environmental point of view. Not only do you want the good food that comes from the beef and the cattle and the poultry that are reared throughout our countryside, but you also need them to keep it grazed, to keep the hillsides like they are. And so it's a combination of getting the environment right with food production. But I am a farmer, I declare an interest. We've got to have enough production in this country to make sure that food and farming is viable, the processing industries are viable to process those products, and we can do it. But we've just got to go forward in a manner where we realise we need to realise how important farming is to the countryside, as well as good quality food under high welfare standards.
Neil Parish, thank you very much indeed for joining us.